and I've never actually worked at the Speakeasy, but I think I did actually play one night there. But mainly I would just go in to see someone else or get up and do a guest set or something like that, a benefits. And one night, all the doors were open, including the front door, which is like a falafel place. Have you been in the Speakeasy?
Yes, I've been there.
And I thought it was just interesting to me that standing on the stage at the microphone in Speakeasy, I could look right down the hall, right across the street, to the stairs that led down to where the gaslight used to be. You know? And I thought, wow. This was big for
you had your own flash.
Yeah, my own flash was
Going
right
down
there.
every time you go down those stairs.
Yeah. And then one night, I think my agent from England was visiting. I know I was walking around the village with some, I think it was my agent from England, and something was going on at the Gaslight. They were doing some construction or something. It's, you know, it's going through many different permutations, different restaurants, and it was closed, but there was someone down there, lights were on, so we went down, and someone was getting ready to put a new restaurant or something in there, so we went in, and it was phenomenal. I could say, right there, that's where Peter, Paul, and Mary sang the first songs in public they ever sang.
Together.
They were rehearsing across the street, upstairs in the back at Mary's apartment, and they just reached the point where, this is all well and good, but let's see if anyone likes it or not. So they walked down and came across the street and got up and did a guest set. And Paul was my roommate at that time. So I said, well, it's about time you guys broke out. Let's hear it. And that was the stage where Ian and Sylvia sang their first guest shot in New York. Albert Grossman brought them in, and they got up and, wowed the place. So it was wonderful, just walking back in there for a minute and looking around. And so many memories, I can't tell you. I mean, just unbelievable numbers of memories. And, there was a graffitum in the men's room that was always one of my personal favorites. That said, Plato loves Alcibiades. I've always loved that one. But we were talking a minute ago about the two different strains.
Right.
Folk songs, which I didn't know were called folk songs. I just knew that, there was Jimmy Crack Corn. Something about these songs, even the trivial ones, like Jimmy Crack Corn or Lolly Toodum, which was part of Burl Ives' repertoire. Now and then you'd hear a song like that from Fred Waring. Fred Waring and the Pennsylvanias frequently used American folk songs. Shenandoah, I first heard sung on a Fred Waring show. And they usually, by the way, they treated them with great respect. At least as I recall. These songs always meant something special to me, and I didn't know what. I just knew that there was a dimension there that I loved, and that I knew that these were songs from another day. And I always loved history, and these were kind of like living history, these things. They were a real connection. And in a strange kind of way, like a musical like Oklahoma, has real resonance of that time. I mean, I grew up in Oklahoma, and of course a stage show is not life, we all know that. Theater is something else, but there's nothing about seeing that show Oklahoma that would insult an Oklahoman who would say, no, get out of here. No, not at all. So I always loved songs that were folk songs or folk-like songs. I liked them, even though I made affectionate fun of Ghost Riders in the Sky when I wrote Yuppies, the song attracted me. Mule Train, Cry of the Wild Goose. By the way, Liza Gilkyson.
Uh-huh.
Her dad wrote that song. Terry Gilkyson, yeah.
I've often wondered if that was her dad.
Yeah, that was her dad, Terry. And down at Kerrville a year or so ago, I finally met Liza. And I said, hey, tell your dad he had an influence on me. And then she said, oh, he'll be so happy to hear that. So these were, like the indigenous songs. And they always had an effect on me. I always liked them, even while I was liking my, the pop songs of my youth. And, when I hear them now, I can have my nostalgic hit. Luckily, most of the pop songs of my day were absolutely execrable songs. I mean, there's no reason to,
leave you.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, get out of here. Patti Page, come on. But the folk songs I still like. So I loved folk songs before I started hearing political songs in a folk genre. Before I started hearing union songs. Before I began to see folk song as a political expression as well as folk expression. And to me it was kind of a seamless kind of a joining. I mean, I don't have to, I never chose. I never felt I had to make a choice, It's all one to me.
Sure. That's what
That's Fred Hellman.
That's what Fred Hellman said to us on Tuesday. It's amazing. He said to us, and it's interesting that there's people who move into the life you moved into and Fred moved into. It's because of things that drive you. I talked to Fred. We talked to Fred about he said, did you make a decision in the Weavers to go commercial? And he looked at us and he said, that's what's written. He said, we just wanted to sing for one thing, and we wanted to be heard. And he said the other thing is that in the lives of Pete and myself and Ronnie and Lee Hayes, there was never a distinction between the political and the songs we sang.
Right.
For us, they were joined.
Absolutely.
And the fact that you sang a traditional song in a traditional way, or even in a popular way, in our own minds, it wasn't that we weren't doing a political act at that point, or weren't. To us, it was our being. It was our being. It was
well,
Yeah, look in the light.
certainly. My equivalent of being blinded on the road to Damascus was one day in Norman when I was I guess I was a junior. I was a drama major. And one of my pals, his name Johnny Horton, not the country singer, and we had guitars and we were learning folk songs. And, I came by his place one day and he said, listen to this, and he put this album on. And by the time the album finished, I had a molecular change. And it was the Weavers at Carnegie Hall. And, I've subsequently told every one of the Weavers, thanks a lot, you guys, for, I blame everything on you. Because by the time that album finished, I had gone from loving folk songs to having to do it. It absolutely set me on this path, that experience, And you listen to the album, and so many of the songs on that album are totally devoid of political content. I mean, Kiss is Sweeter Than Wine, so many of them. But there's something that comes through these songs is humanity matters, People fucking matter, And people ought not to be fucked with, People deserve a break. People are valuable. People are a resource. And here's how they sound when they sing. And I got chills. I said, yeah, God damn it. I want to do that. I want to be part of this conversation. And so, my life is ruined. What are you going to do?
So you, how'd you end up? How'd you end up going to the Village? I mean, did you know that that's what
You were
Greenwich
for a
Village
kid.
Well,
was?
I think I would have wound up there anyhow, but as it happened, I got sent up here in the Army. First to the Army Information School on a windswept rocky island off the primitive coast of New Rochelle. Fort Slocum it was called, and then I was transferred down to Fort Dix, and all that time I was coming in on weekend passes and sleeping on the sofa of a friend of mine from college in the Village, and haunting the coffee houses and making friends and getting up and doing guest sets when they'd let me, and then I started subbing for people who didn't show up, and
This is 60 or so?
1960 exactly, yeah. And when I got out in September of 60, I just stayed and kept sleeping on sofas and shifting residence frequently, and
Were you writing songs then?
yeah.
Were you writing songs about political? I mean,
Yeah,
people
right from the
talking
start,
political
yeah,
stuff then,
sure.
or-
The civil rights movement was just really picking up momentum then, and a song I wrote one day in typing class at Fort Dix, which is also where I wrote The Marvelous Toy, on the Army's typewriter. It's a true story.
Yeah, that's the legend.
Yeah, that's, I get a lot of mileage out of that comically, but it's true. I mean, I wrote it on the Army typewriter. I wish I had that. I don't know if anywhere, but I have the. It was pink practice paper that we had, and that's where the lyric is. And I don't think I have it anymore. But before I wrote that, I wrote a song called Mr. Woolworth, because the Woolworths were being picketed in the north, because the lunch counters in the south is where the sit-ins are going on. So I wrote this, instantly forgettable agitprop called Mr. Woolworth. And so right from the off, I was writing songs that were political as well as children's songs or whatever. Because my idol is always, my mentor was always Woody Guthrie, in that he wrote every kind of song.
Yeah.
Once you free yourself from the need to find a market for everything you write, then you can write anything, including marketable songs. Some of my songs have been hit songs, but they were written not for myself. If it were just for myself, I wouldn't write, because it's too much work. But they were written for that audience, not my audience, but the people who went to the same kind of concerts I went to.
Exactly.
Writing for them.
Yeah.
Because was there a market in 1960?
Oh yes, sure.
Uh-huh.
Kingston Trio had already
Okay.
become huge at that point, and there was a folk trio everywhere. As a matter of fact, I was in one for a week. I was in the Chad Mitchell Trio for 1 week.
That's right.
I was, yeah. I replaced. I never knew the guy's name, but he was one of the original trio, and he dropped out and went back to college. So they had auditions, and this was right after I got in the Army, and I won.
Was this before they recorded?
No, they had a
the
couple.
originals. They had already formed.
Yeah, they had that Blue Angel album out already.
Yeah.
And they had been adopted by the Belafonte organization, and they were scheduled to be on the Belafonte special, in like 2 months' time or something. And so they had the auditions just in the next block up at Columbia Music CMI halls there. So I went, and I don't even remember what I sang. I had to borrow Jim McGuinn, later Roger McGuinn's guitar. He was their accompanist. And I sang something, and they said, well, can you sing Jamaica Farewell? So I sang a little of that, and said, we'd like to work with you. And I couldn't believe it. But a week later, unfortunately, they had to let me go because the voices didn't blend properly. And I was not experienced enough to be able to adapt. So I lost the gig, which was crushing. But in the meantime, during a break in rehearsal, I had sung The Marvelous Toy for them, which was the only good song I had. And they loved that song and subsequently recorded it. But much more importantly, their musical director was a man named Milt Oaken. And he had to break the news to me that they were going to have to let me go, which was crushing. But he said, listen, I love that song. I think you could be a writer. and I'd be happy to publish anything you write. So, stay in touch. So, talk about conflicting emotions. I lost that gig, but I also said, my God, I can be a songwriter. I can write songs. So I just started writing my ass off. I'd call poor Milt. I would call him at all hours with a song and sing it to him over the phone. And, he was a saint about it. I called him at 11 o'clock one night and sang him Going to the Zoo over the phone. And, we've laughed about it many times since then. And I said, how did you do that? And he said, I don't know. I thought it was worth it. It was worth it. He makes light of it, but it must have been nuts.
Right.
Here's this guy on the phone at 11 o'clock. What have I done? Giving him my number. But so I've often wondered what it would have been like if I had, stayed in the trio. I would have kept writing. It would have changed my writing, I'm sure. I would have been writing because I always thought that the Chad Mitchell trio was a great. Because they were always cutting edge. They never. I don't think they ever had a real hit.
No.
They had some stuff that went on the radio a lot, like John Birch Society. It was a wonderful piece of material.
Yeah.
Some woman in Georgia wrote that, and a couple other very funny review kind of songs.
Yeah, they did a wonderful, beautiful rendition of "Last Night I Had the Strangest Dream," which was another one I remember from those days.
And I don't know what that would have been like for me, because that would have been on the road immediately, constantly. And now, none of them are around me. So I don't know. I know I hated losing a job. I hated losing a position. I hated losing. I wanted it, and it really crushed me to lose it. But it forced me out on my own.
How long had you been in town then?
No time.
No time at all.
Bam!
So you got it
it was
immediately.
unbelievable.
5 minutes, yeah. Okay.
I was working for $10 a night when I worked, and suddenly, bam, there it was. Belafonte special, and but I didn't get it. Joe Frazier, this son of a bitch, got it. Joe and I are good friends. He is an Episcopal priest.
Really?
Is that right?
In San Francisco.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, we should look at.
We see each other.
him.
Yeah. I'll give you his number.
I'd
Yeah,
love
we'd
to
love to
talk
talk
to
to
him.
him.
Yeah, we see him.
Yeah.
We see each other, and he's a wonderful guy. Now, Joe was always the most committed member of the group politically. He was always a radical, wild radical, and he had a big effect on the direction the Chad Mitchell Trio took.
Interesting.
Where did you play when you got to town in 1960? You started sleeping in friends' couches,
Yeah.
coming out from the army, getting out, and moving
Sure.
in. Where'd you play?
Well,
Gertie's wasn't there yet in the earliest days.
yes,
or
it was.
It was there.
Yeah,
Okay.
Gertie's was there when I got here.
Okay.
My first weekend pass,
Mm-hmm.
I went to Gertie's and Syed McCurdy, who I'd loved already. I had a couple of his albums and learned songs from them. Blood, Booze, and Bones was a absolutely
I know the
pivotal.
song, yeah.
I knew every song on that album. He lives in Halifax now.
Yeah, we have his address.
Yeah. And he was actually down here in November for the Tom Clancy Memorial up at, and so I hadn't seen him in a while. There he was. And so I went to see him, and the opening act was Sandy Bull. So I got to know Ed right away. I also saw Cisco Houston play it at the last time he ever played. I didn't know it, but he was at Gertie's. So Gertie's was over there by NYU. And then there was the Gaslight and the Bitter End and the Cafe Wa, the Cafe Bazaar, which I never played. It was strictly a tourist place, Cafe Bazaar, and lots of little places. I can look back and see that when the Cafe Wa was strictly a tourist beatnik kind of place, it was always crammed, and I worked there a lot in the afternoons running a hootenanny for I think $10 a day, about what I got out of it, which was fabulous. So long as you don't need to live. The Gaslight always had, John Mitchell owned the Gaslight, and he was a true Greenwich Village guy. He mainly had poets in there. Poets, it was the end of the Beat generation, and poets were still the thing. And the folk singers basically were between the poets to break things up.
John Cohen, just as a brief aside, John Cohen of the Ramblers told me, you can't do this movie. You got to start with the beats. You got to start with the beats. You got to go through the whole thing.
There was a big influence when I first came here at the Beach. Absolutely. Kerouac was still around. Ginsberg, Bob Kaufman. I still remember a line from a poem that Bob Kaufman recited one night, somewhat deliriously. The line was, "I resign, announce me vegetable." I thought, Jesus Christ.
Kind of apropos
Yeah,
of my
yeah.
life. I don't know.
Yeah, but what do you really think? You know? But the first night that I went into the Gaslight, stars in my eyes. I mean, God, I was from Oklahoma, folks, you know, and suddenly I was finding my people, you know, and John Brent and Hugh Romney, later Wavy Gravy, were the poets, and Len Chandler was the folk singer, and a guy named Jimmy Gavin, who later changed his name to Weston Gavin. I think he became, he was Sufi, or Suba, I forget. Changed his name to Weston Gavin and became an actor. And Len Chandler and I are still friends. Do you know Len? Yeah, he's in Los Angeles.
He's in LA,
Yeah.
And we know a guy who's talked to him about a book
So Len
project.
was my first folk singer friend. The first guy I really became friends with in New York. And the Gaslight was a basket house at that point, and the turnover was tremendous. I mean, they kept people really moving in and out of there. And you know, the basket was at the door on the way out, and you dropped money in. And you couldn't applaud because the air shaft, and so applause was clicking the fingers. You couldn't applaud in there, and that changed. Well, because apparently the tenants upstairs would complain the noise would come up the air shaft. Why that changed subsequently, I don't know. But I mean, that was only for the first year or so. I mean, you'd finish a song, it would sound like crickets had gone crazy, you know. But at that point, I mean, the foot traffic on McDougal Street on weekends was, you know, you couldn't drive a car down there. It was so people coming down to see beatniks, because the beatniks would recite these poems and they would say "fuck" in the poems, and my God, man, that was hey, wow, we're living now, you know, we are living now, Maud. And so it was exciting. You know, and I was suddenly, you know, I was able to hear folk songs, for God's sake. I was able to hear folk songs. It was fantastic. I would slip around with my guitar case and go in and, you know, they'd let me get up and sing a guest set. And right from the start, I knew that you would sing 3 songs and that's it. You know, you never,
please.
yes,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
Never overstay your welcome.
Yeah.
Consequently, when I'd come in, it wouldn't be, oh God, here he comes, what am I going to do? It would be, oh great, you know, we can take a cigarette break, you know, let Tom sing a few songs, and so I was always able to get up and sing, and I would get free hamburgers or something like that. And mainly got to know guys, just got to made friends, and became a village habitué.
Yeah.
Then I met guys like Dave Van Ronk, and you know, he was my best man when Mitch and I got married. In '61, Dylan got here, and Van Ronk and I were sitting at Gertie's on a Monday night, hootenanny. You sang 3 songs, period, in the hootenannies. There was one mic. There was no guitar mic. You know, if you played a guitar solo, you raised your guitar up to the mic. You know, and I mean, there was a whole kind of technique.
Monitors, were there?
No, a whole technique long since died out. I mean, guys would disappear behind their guitars. You see, and. But since there was just one mic, I mean, there was no turnover time, you know, no setup time or anything, you know. Brother John Sellers was the MC, and he'd get up there and introduce the next person. They'd be up there and they'd sing 3 songs, and if they were terrible, you could sit through it because it was only 3 songs. But you never knew who you'd see. You know? I mean, the Clancy brothers would come in and sing 3 songs, and so here suddenly this skinny kid gets up and sings 3 Woody Guthrie songs in his distinctive way, and Ronk and I all said, hey, you know, whoever this guy is, he's good. You know, this is you know, somebody worth hearing. So we became friends, all of us. And, Oakes got here the year after that. Oakes got here in '62, and In '63, Midge and I got married, and we were out on the West Coast. We wound up going up and playing in Berkeley someplace, and Debbie Green was booking his club in Berkeley, and she was living with Eric Anderson, who was singing, and so we said, Eric, if you ever come east. So we came east like a couple weeks later, and we introduced him around. And so he was around too for a long time. And David Blue, what was his name? David Cohen, who I owe for meeting my wife. He ran into my wife. They knew each other from someplace, and he was walking over the gas station, so he came in, and that's how I met my wife. And he dropped dead while jogging around Washington Square.
That's what I read.
Yeah, I saw him a week before that. He had just been playing a play in Montreal, playing the part of Leonard Cohen.
Yeah, I had read that. And he had on jogging clothes, so nobody knew who he was.
Yeah.
And he had to be identified a few days later.
Yeah.
It's a sad story.
Yeah.
When did you get a record contract? When did someone come and approach you and say, hey, you're good?
I was in New York for 4 years before I got a record contract. At a time when everyone got record contracts, when folk music was happening, it seemed to me that everyone had a record contract but me. I did a privately produced album for the Gaslight in 1962, but that's not a record contract. That's just a record. It's sold at the cash register. And it's one thing if you can say, well, only 13 more months now until I get my record contract. That's one thing, but you don't know. And it was really becoming everyone had them but me. When is this going to end? When am I going to get a contract? But finally, Harold Leventhal, who was managing me at the time, said to Jack Holzman, why don't you record Tom? And Jack said, well, have him come over to my house and sing for me. So I went over to Jack's house, which was a block away from where we were living. He lived on 12th Street in Butterfield House. So I went around to his house, his Butterfield house, which was a condominium, very high-tech, very, rosewood wall units, and very intimidating, very posh. I went into his den, and I sang 4 or 5 songs, and he never looked at me. We've talked about this several times. Never looked at me, just looked. And he said, well, I hope you can, sing with more animation than that. And he said, but I tell you what, I will offer you my standard deal. So we'll go in the studio, we'll do a session, which is 3 hours. In those days, it was 3 hours was a session. And said, and if we come up with anything, we'll sign a contract, If we don't come up with anything, I'll give you the tape. Fair enough. So I subsequently did 7 albums for him.
Yeah.
And Jack and I are friends. I love the man. He's such a character. He is so Mr. Gruff. But boy, a lot of people owe a lot to Jack Holtzman, and I'm one of them. And I did 7 albums for him that made me.
Yeah.
I had no idea making these albums that were, they were selling like 12,000 copies. How could these albums have the effect that they clearly have had, But
when you went in for your 3-hour session, did you? That's a lot of pressure. All of a sudden, you have 3 hours. This is you're going to make your break.
And you're what? You're 23, 24 years old,
like
and you got
25. Yes, I was 25.
Okay.
I don't remember feeling the pressure. Paul Rothschild produced that and the next 2 albums, and he was so enthusiastic from the first moment that somehow I felt everything was okay. So I don't remember that. I must have.
Well, you sure had a lot of performing under your belt by then.
Yeah.
A lot of songwriting experience. So.
So 3 hours and you got an album.
Oh no. We just got to start on an album.
Okay, but Jack liked it, so that's.
Oh yeah. Clearly, Paul had a conduit to Jack to say, this is definitely what we, absolutely, let's keep going.
Okay.
So that must have, a phone call must have been made while I was out of the bathroom or something.
Yeah. Was there a lot of informal play from the early years at people's houses and
Oh, yeah.
parties. I've heard
Oh,
that
right,
Dylan
yeah.
made his reputation in the village at those parties more than he did.
Well, no, Dylan made his reputation really at Hoots.
Did he? Okay.
At Hoots. But yeah, 190 Waverly Place. Where are we? We're up at 50
Thanks a lot.
Cents right now. 190 Waverly Place was where Van Ronk lived and Barry Kornfeld lived. And Barry lived on the ground floor. I think he still does. I think he pays about, $12 a month, to this day. I just found out about 2 years ago, I met David Frischberg, the jazz songwriter, My Attorney Bernie.
I don't know the song.
Oh, don't you love the title? My Attorney
Yeah,
Bernie.
I love the title. It's great.
Now, he plays a lot of jazz clubs, and he writes a lot of funny songs and stuff, and he's very interesting, laconic kind of, he's a very jazz kind of guy. Turned out later that he lived on the top floor, and we drove him nuts because he could hear the, folk songs, and I was, God damn. But we did a lot of hanging around at Van Ronk's house, and we played years of Monopoly. As a matter of fact, they even, Van Ronk was in the Socialist Workers' Party at that time, which, when you'd hear these guys talking about it, you would think it was some like vast worldwide party. It was like, 50 guys. Or something,
Right.
And there were faction fights within
the 50 guys.
Yeah. With manifestos being written, So, these are guys with, too many brains, and, not enough to do with them.
Right.
And so they invented something we played for a while called corporate monopoly. And a game of corporate monopoly would take 4 days to play because you would own a monopoly with, if you had if all three of them were bought, you would form a corporation, and whoever had, the top one of the three would be chairman of the board and everything. So the rents would have to be it was unbelievable, People with too much time on their hands is what this was all about, And when we should have been writing songs, we were playing corporate monopoly. But a lot of songs were sung for the first time in those circumstances. I got a new song, sing it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times these songs were sung, played and sung when people would rather not have heard them. I know in my case, I'm sure that I imposed and sang songs that were not very good because I wanted them to hear my song. Look what I've done. But basically, I think people were pretty good to one another about listening to songs and lying in their teeth about how good they were, and now and then they were good. But a lot of bad stuff that had to get written and out, out of the system.
It goes.
Sure.
When did you first meet or go up to Broadside? This is funny. We saw Sis yesterday she says to say hello.
Oh,
She
how
wanted
nice.
to say hello to you.
Great. Must have been very, very early. I don't remember the first time. I know it was not where they're living now. It was some other place.
You guys were at a housing project. She was
Yeah,
telling us a funny story.
yeah,
They have to sneak the magazines out because they're not allowed to have any sort of commerce going on.
Yeah. I don't remember exactly when it was, but they were big supporters of all of us topical songwriters. And the Broadside hoots that we used to have at the Village Gate were great fun. And I never forget when this little 15-year-old girl, Janice Fink, got up and sang, who became Janice Ian. And Len Chandler and I just fell out of our chairs. We were just so taken by her. And she was good. Talk about precocious. Get out of here. She was
15.
Yeah.
Was she lusted after at age 15 by?
No, oddly enough. Not that we were
Taking
capable of lusting after a 15-year-old, but no, we immediately felt big brotherly toward her.
that's a precocious child going down and singing at 15
I know.
years old. I mean, you think of 15-year-old.
She had
Yeah.
music because she had educated parents who
Yeah.
lived in town. I
Yeah,
understand.
yeah,
And, I think one of her parents was in the music business or on the periphery of
I
it.
think so. Yeah.
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 But that's interesting. Was there I sense a lot of collegiality. Was there money came into the scene at some point?
Well, there was rivalry as well.
Okay.
Certainly there was rivalry. In that none of us feels the same way all day long, ever. There was at one moment collegiality and great good wishes for one another, and there was also at the same instant rivalry and jealousy. Dylan's meteoric rise did not go unnoticed, or unresented or jealousy was certainly one couldn't help saying, well, why not me? When's my turn? And I know I was better at suppressing that. I'm sure I felt it. Phil was eaten up with jealousy and love. I mean, he idolized Dylan, and they would have these cutting sessions. Dylan would just be terrible to Phil, and we would sit around a kettle of fish. Who's who of the Gaslights sitting around a kettle of fish, and a cutting session would start. It would be mostly funny, but since there are no jokes,
Yes.
there are no jokes. But I like to think, with my eyes wide open, that there was a great deal of love as well. Certainly jealousy, certainly envy, but also a lot of good wishes. I mean, I've always liked Bob, and these days I don't think a lot of his work, but the man has, I think the thing that I really like about Bob the most to this day is he's a working songwriter. He works. He's not. Whatever he does with his spare time, I don't know. If he sits around a hot tub, I couldn't care less.
Yeah.
He works. He puts out material. He's a professional, and I love him for that.
That is consistent with what we just read. Robert Hilburn of the LA Times recently was granted an interview with him, one of the rare ones, I guess, and he wrote a very complimentary piece that got republished in the San Francisco Chronicle. He was on his bus out in the Midwest on what they're calling now the never-ending tour. I mean, Bob's been on the road now. It's his 5th year, I think. And Dylan was telling him what I found I had to do to get by the legend thing. It took a long time to work that legend thing out. And what I had to do is I had to go out and I had to play 5,000-seat halls, which he does. We see him in San Francisco now in the last couple of years. I had to just do it night after night and get out there like the Grateful Dead, which he compared himself to, and he said that's why I went out there. And the only way to get, I was never going to get past that legend thing if I showed up every 4 years in Madison Square Garden for a big hoopla. I had to get out there and work, and since that's what I wanted to do, that's what I did. It was an interesting comment.
Yeah, good for Bob. Good for him.
I gathered that there was also a lot of music study. I read people talking about sitting there devouring Harry Smith's anthology and field recordings and Library of Congress stuff.
Some more than others.
Okay.
I had volume 1 of the anthology. I don't know whether any of it ever went in my repertoire. I had a very eclectic repertoire in the beginning. As a matter of fact, once again, without knowing that I was doing it, I did one thing that was, in retrospect, wise of me, which is that I didn't count on my own repertoire until a long time in. It was 8 or 9 years in before my shows would basically consist of nothing but my own songs. And if you told me that I could say one thing to a young performer that they would act upon, and if I only got one, I would say, don't put that pressure on yourself from the beginning. They don't know your song. Sing something that they know and you love. You know, you don't have to prostitute yourself. You don't have to go out and sing country roads if you hate it. You know, but there's stuff out there that you love, that you grew up liking, and that they like. Base your repertoire on that, and put your own best stuff in there. But don't force yourself to make it as a singer-songwriter before you're ready. And I sang anything that I loved, I sang. And it was really 69 before, just kind of by a natural process, there was enough of my own material that was of a quality that would sustain a whole show. So I don't know how much of that stuff I learned. I know I listened to traditional records a lot. I know I sang a lot of traditional songs. And some people did an incredible amount of homework, incredible amount of listening to, you know, folkways, ethnic records, and true field recordings, and learn their material that way. Yeah.
Van Ronk seems to have, from what I read of him and from what I read on his records, he seems to have developed almost an ethnomusicologist's knowledge.
Van Ronk, have you talked to him yet?
No, next week.
It's going to be. Well,
Yeah, next
Van
week.
Ronk has got an incredible retentive memory. I mean, he's God knows where his IQ is, but I mean, he's an intellectual.
Yeah.
And it shows. I mean, his encyclopedic grasp of not just that, but of jazz. Incredible. So, you know, bring a lot of tape. Because Dave knows a lot about it, you know, and he did a lot of homework. I remember there's one, I heard a remark made once about someone. I wish I could, if I knew about whom it was made, I might not say, because it's a wonderful, catty remark made about someone who obviously, you know, was a real traditional. So I heard this dismissive crack made about this person, and I don't remember who it was. Saying, oh, him, you know. He's so traditional. He's got surface noise in his voice.
That's a good line.
Isn't that a great one? Yeah.
That's a good line.
Oh, that's
Yeah. But that draws a picture, and there were, I mean, there are a lot of guys around like that, you know. So there was also a dichotomy. It's different schools of thought of that I could actually, you know, from this perspective, I could look back and would, you know, somewhat dismissively say I'm too pure to be a performer school of thought of, you know, you don't deserve a performance from me. I'm giving you this music, and that's all you get.
Right.
And that always drove me a little bit nuts. On the other hand, you'd have guys who were all flash. You know, who, I remember one guy who shall remain nameless. I was watching him at the Philly Folk Festival early on, and he finished his set, and he had one of the guitar straps. It was like a saxophone strap. It came down and up from under, and then hooked into the sound hole.
Okay.
From under.
Okay.
Okay. He finished his set, and by the way, I like the guy personally. Finished his set by spinning the guitar out of the little thing and down to his side. And I was way off to the side, and the remark that came right on me was what a dismount. You know, what a dismount.
You held up your car that said 10.
Yeah, absolutely. A 10 for a dismount. But at the same time, I mean, I instantly know, wait a minute, this is not what it's about. This is too much.
Yeah.
This is too much of that. There can be too little, there can be too much. I mean, you have to learn how to perform. A performance has got to be edited truth, is the way I finally came down to my own philosophy of it. It's edited truth. It's got to be real, but it ain't a living room, you know? But it has to be true. but it's not your living room. You know, cut out the ums and ahs,
Yeah.
you know, but don't bullshit. So it's a fine line to walk, you know, and then you have to, you know, I mean, you have this, I always came up with this triage philosophy about repertoire. Am I going on too much here?
No, this is
No,
all-
not at all. Not at all.
Triage to me, a philosophy of repertoire, which is that there are I told a songwriting class about this yesterday at NASA. There are, when you're choosing the songs to sing, there are songs that are your babies. You love these songs. You love these songs. And they almost invariably draw yawns. You love them, they don't go over. There are songs which would make your reputation as a performer. They would bring you standing ovations, but which would give you a ring around the soul to do. You know, you would be a whore by doing these songs, but they would never fail you. And there are songs in the middle that will work and that you love, and you got to stick with them. Those are the ones. And this changes from time to time. Now and then, you might bring one of your little babies in again, see if it works. No, still not working. So, you know, back down to the minors. You know. But you always leave that shit in. Always leave. I mean, I remember very, very early, when I was still in Oklahoma, still spending time in the Midwest in the coffee houses in the early 60s. They were very different from the coffee houses of Greenwich Village. They were very unsophisticated. And there were a couple of songs that were going around about hairdressers. They were parodies, you know. And they were about being gay and swishy. And audiences would fall out of their chairs. Loved them. I mean, these songs were. And I thought, no way. No way. You know. And I would see the applause that these performers were getting for doing it. And I would envy that because I was not a good performer yet. I really wasn't. I was still learning, and my repertoire was too much of the first kind of songs that I thought were wonderful, weren't going over. So I was having real problem. But I thought, no, I mean, that's, you know, fag songs. It's not the way. You know? And I guarantee you that none of those performers, none of those performers are around. You know, it's not the way to go.
When people started responding then to your songs, particularly your topical songs, do you remember what you started thinking or saying, well, this was working, or that the fact that you were really making an influence on people and your music?
Well, I didn't think so much about influence. I think mostly what happened was that the next phase was that portions of the show would go over, particular songs would go over, but I didn't know how to build, and I would still have elements of the set that weren't happening. But I remember writing a song that I sang at the Berkeley Folk Festival in 1965. And I had just written that song. It was called We Didn't Know. And I sang it at the final concert, which was in the Greek Theater. And it had a big impact. And it made me feel good because I had really put my gut in that song. It said something I really felt. And it went over extremely well. And I remember being very happy about that, thinking, good, I got through with something, you know, something that mattered to me, mattered to them. And I felt a circuit had been completed. Now, surely there must have been moments like that before that with topical songs, but I think mainly up until that time, my successful songs had been songs like Ramblin' Boy or Can't Help But Wonder Where I'm Bound. Not so much overtly political songs, even though I'd continued to write them. I think that was the first one that really had a punch, a feedback to it.
Are you aware that a lot of that stuff has survived? I mean, people remember Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney, and Lincoln Johnson told the nation.
I know. Actually, when that movie came out, I sang. I brought back Goodman, Shorter, and Cheney for a while, you know, and I said before I sang the song, I said, I didn't see the movie because a movie that makes the FBI heroes of the civil rights movement is a movie I'm just going to skip. Thank you very much. But this is something I wrote at the time that stuff happened.
Did you do a lot of? I know some people did rallies and things. Did you do? I have a picture of you and Oakes on a platform at a rally together, leaning into one another. And
Really?
It's in a book. I don't have it personally.
I'd like to see that.
Oh, it's in my stuff in San
Great.
Francisco.
Please. I'd love to see that. Endless, tons of rallies and marches.
When did that start? I mean, when you went into the village initially.
Oh, it started immediately with I sang Mr. Woolworth outside the Woolworth at Broadway and 8th, between 8th and 9th on Broadway. I sang it on the sidewalk in the picket line. So right from the beginning. Yeah.
So it was early on. And you and Oakes were writing about Vietnam before anybody was writing about it.
Right.
I think in Oakes' second album or first album, he's got Talking Vietnam.
Yeah, I wrote Lyndon Johnson in 1965.
Okay.
You know, the minute the first expansion of troops went over.
Right.
I wrote that song, yeah. I think I could probably put together an album of songs that I wrote about Vietnam.
Really?
Probably. I won't, but I wrote a lot of songs about Vietnam. I'm still writing them, you know. I'm still writing them. I probably will continue. Now I want to write a song. A guy came up to me. Veterans come up to me. Guy came up to me once, big guy, in a parking lot. I thought, what's happening here? You know, but he stuck out this huge hand. They said, I first heard your songs on Hill 23, Ducto Province, and I want to thank you. And I thought, oh my God. It made me feel so humble, you know. And guys have told me about, listening to my songs in hooches, and I had no idea that was going on. But recently a guy came up and said that he loved the songs. He says, but now he says, write a song about the MIAs. He said, some of my guys, and I never heard from them, And so I said, Jesus, I'll try. What can you do but try? Sure, I wrote a song about the unknown soldier. It's one of my personal favorites, that song. I like it. As a songwriter, I like that song. It really said something I wanted to say in a songwriterly way. I've hardly ever done it in concert, but I don't think we'll ever be finished with that war. Ever. It's the defining moment of our whole generation, that war.
It may be that everybody who lives through it has to die, which brings us to several generations.
I think so.
Maybe that's the case in which it is.
We went to see For the Boys, which we liked very much. I was sorry to see it fail so badly. But when we came out of that, I said, I was still shook by the Vietnam sequence, which struck me as being so true. The way that was done.
You haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it?
Yeah.
Oh God! Yeah. It's worth seeing it.
Okay. We will turn.
Okay.
Let's pay him and head out.
I have to run to the